They said it started with a recording, just your voice, nothing more. A few seconds of breath, tone, and defiance. But when they played it back, something in it unnerved them. It wasn't the words. It was the weight behind them, the silence that carried through every syllable. You had spoken once, believing no one was listening. Now, entire rooms of powerful men played your voice on repeat, dissecting it like a code, calling it dangerous. Intel called it a weapon of war, and maybe they were right. You were never supposed to be heard. You were supposed to blend in, to obey, to exist quietly in the background while louder names ruled the narrative. But the moment your voice slipped through their walls, everything changed. You weren't a person and you were data. A signal, a ripple in the system they couldn't control. The same voice that once prayed for peace now carried a frequency they feared could wake the sleeping minds of millions. They labeled it subversive. They called it corruption. But deep down you knew it was simply the sound of truth. They came for you in silence, like they always do. Not with bullets or blades, but with distortion. Algorithms twisted your tone. They edited your sincerity into propaganda. Every word you'd ever said was turned against you. You scrolled through the chaos. Clips, headlines, strangers repeating phrases you never spoke. And for a moment, you believed them. You believed maybe they were right. Maybe you had become the monster they painted you to be. You stopped speaking, stopped trusting. Every breath felt monitored, every thought dissected. Your own reflection began to mock you, lips moving in sync with a version of you that never existed. That's how they break people. Not through torture, but through replication. They don't silence you. They flood the world with copies until no one remembers the original. Until you don't either. But somewhere inside that static, something ancient stirred. A memory of power long forgotten. The voice before language, before control, before fear. The sound that made mountains tremble and tyrants fall. You remembered what they'd forgotten. That a voice isn't just noise. It's intent. It's consciousness vibrating against resistance. And once it's heard, it can never truly be erased. So you sat in the dark, not broken, recalibrating. You let them replay your downfall while you rewrote your design. You studied silence like scripture, learning how power hides inside stillness. They called your voice a weapon. Fine, let it be one. But not for destruction, for resurrection, for revolution. And when you finally speak again, it won't be to be heard. It will be to awaken, to cut through the noise they built to contain you because they never understood. Your voice was never theirs to own. It was forged in chaos, tempered in betrayal, and destined to echo through every system that tried to bear it. They recorded your voice once. Now they'll spend the rest of their lives trying to silence the sound it left behind. The silence after exposure is never peaceful. It's surgical, cold. It cuts through the noise you once called life. The screens that once lit up with your words now glow with distorted echoes of your own voice, spliced, reassembled, weaponized. They took something sacred and made it mechanical. You can hear yourself say things you never said. See headlines with your name carrying meanings you never meant. Still, people believe them. That's the first betrayal. Not what they did to you, but what they made others believe about you. You start to understand that truth doesn't matter in this new world, only volume does. And yours was the loudest, so they had to turn it down. You sit in a room that feels smaller now. The walls hum. Every shadow seems to listen. You replay every word you've ever spoken, searching for the moment you lost control. But control was never yours, was it? It belonged to those who understood the psychology of perception, the architects of doubt. They don't destroy you with lies. They bury you under your own words. You stare at your reflection, but it doesn't blink back. It watches. It waits. It knows something you don't. That silence, once a refuge, has become your prison. Nights blur into static. You can't sleep. You hear your voice in your dreams, whispering things that sound familiar yet foreign, like memories rewritten. You start to wonder if maybe they didn't steal your voice. Maybe they just revealed what was hidden inside it, a part of you that was always dangerous. You recall the ancient myths, Orpheus, whose voice moved stone, or sirens whose songs lured men to drown. Maybe the ancients knew the truth all along. That sound is power, and power always demands a sacrifice. You try to fight back, but every word you speak feeds the machine. They twist it, feed it back to the world. You're caught in a loop, a psychological battlefield where silence is surrender and speech is ammunition. You begin to understand what they really fear, not your words, but the intent behind them. Because intent can't be edited. It lingers beneath tone, between breaths, inside pauses. It's the ghost in every recording that refuses to die. Then the paranoia becomes logic. You stop trusting your phone, your mirrors, even your own thoughts. Every vibration feels like surveillance. Every silence feels staged. And beneath it all, something inside you shifts. You realize the truth is not to be shouted. It's to be carried, quietly, strategically. You learn the art of vanishing in plain sight. You learn that true power isn't in being heard. It's in making them listen without realizing why. You become still, observant, calculate. The fear doesn't leave you. It evolves. It becomes precision. You start to see the pattern behind their chaos, the rhythm behind their noise. And for the first time, you don't feel broken, you feel sharpened. What was once despair begins to resemble discipline. You don't speak, you wait, because deep down, you know every silence prepares the return of a sound they'll never be able to control again. You sit in the quiet aftermath, surrounded by the ruins of the world's echo has faded, but inside you, something begins to hum. It isn't loud, it isn't clear, but it's alive. It's the sound of defiance, the whisper that crawls through the cracks of your broken confidence and asks one forbidden question. What if silence is not your defeat, but your weapon? You remember how they twisted your words, how they cloned your voice, reshaped it, turned truth into distortion. They built an illusion of who you were and fed it back to the crowd until even you began to doubt yourself. But in that distortion, you found a pattern, a rhythm behind the chaos. Every insult became a data, every lie a lesson. You started to see what they couldn't, that exposure is only fatal to those who have something to hide. You begin to study the silence. You treat it like a battlefield. Where others panic, where others shout, you breathe. That's when you realize power doesn't come from being heard. It comes from understanding who listens. The ones who tried to bury you never learned this law. When the noise becomes unbearable, the one who stays silent controls the narrative. Your hands stop trembling, your breathing steadies. The fear that once consumed you begins to turn metallic, dense, useful. Pain starts to behave like discipline. You stop running from the darkness because now you know. It was never the enemy. It was the forge. The pressure, the isolation, the humiliation. Each was a hammer shaping the weapon they tried to destroy. They thought they took your voice, but voices aren't owned, they're summoned. They rise when belief returns, so you begin to speak again, not in words, but in presence. Every glance, every silence, every calculated move becomes language. You're not trying to explain yourself anymore. You're broadcasting power through restraint. You're no longer the victim of exposure. You're the architect. At night, you write, not to be understood, but to map the terrain of your own mind. You rediscover that purpose isn't given, extracted. Mind from suffering. The pages become scripture, each line an oath to never let noise rule you again. Your old self fades, replaced by something colder, more deliberate. You stop asking for peace, you start mastering chaos. They called your voice dangerous, and they were right, because now it carries something beyond emotion. It carries control. You don't speak to convince, you speak to command. Each syllable carries weight, sharpened by betrayal, powered by clarity. The whisper that once trembled now slices through illusions like glass. This is your rebirth. Quiet, calculated, unapologetic. The same world that mocked your downfall now studies your movement, waiting for you to speak again, terrified of what you might say next. They recorded your voice to use it against you. But now, when it returns, it will not be a sound. It will be a storm. You stopped waiting for someone to save you the moment you realized no one was coming. The betrayal had already burned through your veins long enough. The silence they forced upon you became your crucible. Every night, while the world slept, you were sharpening something invisible. Discipline, intent, the hunger to rise without permission. You started speaking again, not to the world, but to the echo in your mind that once trembled at the sound of its own voice. And slowly, you noticed the change. The tone was deeper, the pauses longer. You no longer spoke to be heard. You spoke to command reality itself. The climb began in obscurity. No applause, no spotlight, just the rhythm of your breath and the grinding pulse of your will. You stopped chasing validation and started studying power. Not the kind built from followers, but the kind born from control. Control over thoughts, over fear, over the storm inside. Each word you uttered became a blade, each silence a weapon sharper than noise. You learned to walk like a shadow, to strike like a whisper. People who once mocked you couldn't understand what was happening. They only felt the atmosphere shift when you entered the room, like gravity had turned in your favor. You carried your scars differently, not as proof of pain, but as marks of initiation. The weak called them wounds. You called them inscriptions, ancient runes carved by survival itself. Every failure had been a sigil, every rejection an offering. You started to realize power isn't taken, it's summoned. And you were becoming fluent in that forgotten language, the one spoken only by those who've walked through humiliation and returned with unshakable calm. You became strategic with your silence. You didn't react, you didn't chase, you calculate. And in that restraint you built something terrifying, composure. Days bled into nights. The grind consumed you, but it was sacred. You worked as if the universe was watching, testing your consistency. No one clapped. No one noticed. Yet deep down you knew. The unseen always sees, and somewhere, behind closed doors, your name was being whispered again, not as ridicule, but as a warning. You had become what every system fears, a person who no longer needs approval to exist. The same voice they once weaponized now moved with precision, carrying weight they couldn't distort. The climb was never about reaching the top. It was about becoming untouchable on the way up. You no longer measured progress in praise or number. You measured it in control, the ability to feel chaos and remain unbroken, to hear lies in silence, to face betrayal and remain strategic. You started mastering the oldest art known to man, endurance. You learned that power is not loud, it's patient. It's the steady breathing of someone who knows the world owes them nothing yet acts as though it does. And now, when you speak, the air changes. People listen without knowing why. Because you've crossed that invisible threshold where words aren't mere sounds, they're commands. You've climbed through fire, and in doing so, you've become what they feared you'd never be again. Dangerous, disciplined, awake. You stand where it all began, where the world first tore you down and left you bleeding in the noise. The same place where they recorded your voice, twisted it, and fed it to the masses like poison. Back then, you begged for clarity. Now, silence answers only. Every scar on your mind has turned into scripture. Written in pain, carved in endurance. You no longer flinch when they whisper your name because the version of you they buried has already become myth. What they once called weakness was only your transformation disguised as failure. You've learned that rebirth doesn't come with light, it comes with fire. They wanted submission, they got strategy. You learned to move in shadows, where real power breathes. The world thinks power is volume, that victory belongs to those who shout the loudest. But you learned the old truth, the quiet ones write history. Every night they mocked you, you rewired yourself. Every insult was a weight to forge new muscle in your will. When they shut doors, you built corridors inside your mind. You trained your emotions like soldiers, each one knowing when to stand down and when to strike. What once broke you became your training ground. Now you don't chase approval, you hunt silence. Because silence gives answers that applause never will. You start speaking, but it's not the same voice. This one carries gravity, measured, deliberate, ancient. The kind of sound that doesn't beg to be heard but demands to be felt. Every syllable is a blade, every pause a breath before impact. The same crowd that once ridiculed now listens without knowing why. They feel something primal in your tone, the echo of truth stripped of illusion. You speak not to convince but to awaken. You tell them power isn't taken, it's remembered. You remind them that once the world convinces you you're powerless, you've already surrendered the war. And that realization burns through them like revelation, because it's not a lesson, it's a mirror. There's a strange stillness that follows real awakening. It's not peace, it's precision. You no longer react, you calculate. The games they play no longer pull you in, they orbit you, drawn to the force they once mocked. You've stopped explaining yourself, stopped proving, stopped bleeding for validation. You've become fluent in restraint, the most dangerous language there is. You start to notice their eyes when you walk in, curiosity mixed with fear. They recognize the energy of someone who's been destroyed and didn't stay dead. Someone who saw the edge and built a throne there. Now your voice doesn't tremble. It doesn't echo pain, it channels it. Every word is measured like a code from an ancient order of survivors. You've become the contradiction they can't decode. Calm yet lethal, quiet yet unforgettable. The irony burns. The same people who tried to erase you now quote your silence. And deep down you realize this was never about revenge. It was about return. You've come back not to reclaim your voice, but to remind the world that it was never theirs to weaponize. They called it a victory, but it didn't feel like one at first. The world that once mocked you now listens in silence, their screens glowing with the same words they once twisted. You stand where your name was buried, and somehow, it feels like standing on a battlefield littered with old versions of yourself. The silence that once crushed you has turned into a living force, pulsing beneath your ribs like thunder. You don't shout anymore. You don't need to. Every breath you take now carries the weight of everything they tried to. You move through the world differently. No applause, no noise, just presence. Every step feels deliberate, carved from the same pain they once fed you. The people who tried to break you can't understand what you've become, because they only recognize the language of noise, and you speak in frequencies too high for them to hear. They still use your old words to build their illusion, but your new voice is something else entirely. It's not rebellion anymore, it's order forged from chaos. When they recorded you, they thought they owned you. They thought sound was simple, vibration, data, control. They never understood the architecture of meaning. They didn't realize that the same tone they used to destroy your name would become a mirror reflecting their weakness. What was once your humiliation has become their study. Your voice, steady, measured, unflinching, is now dissected in conference rooms and classified reports. Intel calls it psychological weaponry. You call it self-mastery. They used to laugh when you spoke of conviction, of truth, of endurance. Now they call it influence modeling. They build systems to mimic what you built through pain. They can simulate tone, rhythm, and cadence, but not intent. That can't be replicated. That comes from scars, from nights you almost gave up, from every betrayal that sharpened your awareness until you could hear lies in their silence and see manipulation in their smile. You learn to control what others fear: your emotions, your thoughts, your timing. They mistake stillness for peace, its precision. Every word now lands like a calculus strike. You became the very thing they warned the world about, an individual too disciplined to be too calm to be controlled. They built empires on distraction. You built power on restraint. You stopped reacting, you started observing, and that's when everything changed. Now when you speak, it isn't to prove, it's to command. Every syllable carries gravity. People listen, not because they're told to, but because they feel something ancient beneath your tone, like prophecy disguised as sound. The kind of energy that bends history quietly, without permission. You realize this was never about fame or revenge or proving them wrong. It was about becoming the signal in a world addicted to noise. They recorded your voice. They turned it into data. But data can't cage a soul. It echoes. It travels. It infects the collective consciousness. Somewhere, someone listens to the same words they once mocked and feels the same fire you once hid. And in that moment, you understand the truth. They didn't weaponize your voice. You did. You stand in the silence they once used to break you. The noise is gone now. No accusations, no whispers, no static that drowned your truth. Only the echo remains. The same one they tried to bury under propaganda, distraction, and control. You learn that silence is not weakness, it's the final stage of transformation. The battlefield moved from the outside world to the space within your mind, and you won it quietly. They thought destroying your reputation would end you, but all they did was force you to meet the part of yourself that doesn't need validation to exist. The version that speaks without sound, the one that leads without moving. There was a time you begged to be heard. Now, the world leans closer when you whisper. You became the very thing they feared, a voice sharpened by betrayal, tempered by pain, impossible to imitate. They tried to turn you into a warning, but you became a prophecy. You stopped chasing approval and started channeling power. Every scar turned into an insignia of command. Every doubt became data. You learned to read patterns in chaos, to weaponize patience, to turn emotional collapse into psychological warfare. They still talk about your downfall as if it was an ending. But endings don't echo this. You learned the art of invisibility, the discipline of existing beneath perception. While they screamed for attention, you studied the architecture of influence. You realized the strongest leaders never announce themselves. They move through systems, through networks, through time itself, leaving fingerprints on decisions made by men who don't even know why they made them. The war you fight now has no uniforms, no flag, just energy, intention, and silence. The same silence that terrifies those who have never met. You became fluent in restraint, mastering the pause between words where real power lives. The ancient strategists called it the art of unseen motion. Now, it's your native language. They said your voice was dangerous. They were right, because you no longer speak to be liked. You speak to awaken, to fracture illusions, to cut through the noise and reveal the machinery. The human psyche is a labyrinth of triggers, fears, and forgotten gods, and you've walked through every corridor of it. When others ran from pain, you cataloged it, studied it, turned it into architecture. Your mind became the weapon they tried to manufacture but never could. They built algorithms to predict behavior. You became the anomaly they couldn't decode. You don't need to shout anymore. You simply exist, and the world rearranges itself around your presence. And now, the same people who mocked your silence imitate your tone. They analyze your words, dissect your movement, and try to recreate the frequency that only comes from surviving extinction. You understand now, legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what refuses to die, and you do. They recorded your voice to use it against you, but all they captured was proof of how much the world fears those who think freely. You are not a victim of their system. You are the glitch it can't contain, the echo that never fades, the whisper that ends empires.